What's going on, everybody, and welcome to what episode is this? Episode 95 of the Book Binge, where we're doing another monthly reading wrap up and TBR. And I'm a little bit closer to the camera than normal. That's why things look a bit different. This time around, I'm just gonna go ahead and say thank goodness I actually finished everything that I was reading in July, and I can finally start off with like a clean slate in September for the first time in forever. It feels like I think it's been a very hot minute since the last time I recorded one of these, and I wasn't in the middle of one of my reads for whatever reason. And actually, that's still kind of technically untrue, but we'll get to that here in just a second. First off, I might as well just get into what I read last month with The Prophet of Edan by Philip Chase. Now, I didn't read this in its entirety in July. I actually started it in June, and I started it right around a week or so before release, in fact, because I was provided an arc by Philip to be able to start it, and it still took me over a month to finish, but I did indeed finish, and I had a great time with it. In fact, usurped a lot of my expectations, and I think bucks a lot of trends when it comes to the structure and formatting of a trilogy. If you want to know a little bit more about that, I did do a written review that talks about the format and structure of a trilogy on Goodreads. That goes into that, and I also did a video review here on the channel a couple weeks ago that talks about that as well as everything else that I thought about the book, so you can go check out either one of those reviews if you are interested. I had a great time with The Prophet of Edan. Next up, I did do Empire of Silence, my reread of this book that I started back in May. I have finally finished it. At the time of recording, I actually still have a tiny bit to go, but given that I'm recording this, like 3 days before the end of the month, and I have an entire free weekend, yeah, I can finish 50 pages in a weekend very, very easily. So even though I'm not technically finished by the time I'm recording this, I can say that I will be by the time this video releases, 100%. Something that struck me while doing this reread is that while I think it absolutely holds up as being the weakest of the entire Sun Eater series up to this point, there are definitely some moments that hit me really hard in ways that didn't in the first time that I read it. Obviously, because I know a lot of the foreshadowing and stuff like that, but a couple chapters in particular, chapters 52 and, oh man, what was it? Was it chapter 65? Was it 65, 66, 67? It was chapter 67 that really hit me hard this time around. Chapter 65 was great because of foreshadowing. 66 was great because of references towards certain stuff in the future that we actually haven't seen yet, and that many of you guys haven't seen at all to any degree at the point that this video is releasing. But that's all I'll say about that, is that there is definitely some scenes that really hold up in this and are actually a lot better than I remember, even though the book may be the weakest of the series. I've been having a very great time with that. Moving on, I did do another book that was from an arc that was provided to me by the author for review, which my Goodreads version of this review is out, and I think the video review comes out a week from today, actually, and that is what's it called? Obsidian Murders by Nicole Barona. The little, cover image or whatever that's on my phone. Let me see if I can push this to light mode and give you a little bit of a better, goodness gracious, image on that. See if that shows a little bit better. Yeah, that one right there in the top corner. Yeah, I did finish that. The cover on here shows Nicole Fox because I got the arc before the pen name changed due to logistical reasons. But yeah, I did finish that. I had a pretty decent time with that. I didn't dislike it. In fact, I enjoyed it a lot for being just a quick, what would you call it? Quick little palate cleanser. And reading it in the midst of several epic fantasy stuff definitely made a big difference as well. Next up, I did read and complete over the course of the month The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan's second book of the Wheel of Time. And I gotta say, if I loved Eye of the World, and I did really love Eye of the World when I read that, The Great Hunt was a million times better already. I loved a lot about it. There was only a couple scenes that I think didn't fully work for me, and only really a couple moments even beyond those scenes that didn't really work for me, which I can say more about than like Eye of the World, where there was only like one specific section of one chapter that I can note out as being like something that I didn't like. But the quality of everything else in the book was very, very good, and I'm very excited to continue on with the next book, which, spoiler alert, won't be this month in April. But with that being said, the next and final thing that I did get read this month, which is kind of a little bit of exclusivity, I suppose, here, because it's kind of been a slightly open secret depending on who you are and where you've been around in certain Discord communities that I'm on. I did get to read through Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 3 by Christopher Archio, which I can't hold up or even show an image or anything, because actually the thing that is holding that back from the release at the moment is the cover art. I haven't heard anything back about that yet, but yeah, I was actually able to work a little bit on this as well, doing some copy editing on the project, which was really cool experience for me. But I did read through that and had a great time. There are a couple really banger stories in there, and if you haven't read any of the stories that are going to end up being compiled in there, you're in for a great time. And even if you have read the ones that have been released in, say, anthologies, there are a few of the others that haven't been published in anthologies that are great. And in fact, the one story that hasn't been published anywhere else, whether it be in a few banned books, anthologies, or on Christopher's Patreon, because there are an additional few on there, the one story, the first story in the collection, is an absolute banger. So I hope that you guys are excited for that, because it is great. And that's basically everything that I read last month. In terms of the book of the month, I'm actually not entirely certain if I would choose The Great Hunt or The Prophet of Adan, but I think I'm going to tentatively choose The Great Hunt for now, just because of how good of a time I had. I think the main reason why I'm going to actually choose it over The Prophet of Adan is because the reason I loved The Way of Adan so much was because of just some sort of certain magic it had for me while reading it. A magic that also made me just want to write my own stuff while I was reading it. Like every time I would pick it up to read, I'd want to immediately go to my computer and do some writing, because it just gave me that itch. The Prophet of Adan didn't quite do that for me, even though it was really good, but The Great Hunt is probably my favorite book that I read in July. With that being said, let's get into this month's reads for August. And I'm going to say it for the last time, all summer I've been saying, like, maybe this month will be a little bit less crazy in my reading schedule, and never once has it been true. This time around, I think it's going to be a little bit true, because there is every chance that I only get through one of these things, which is why the only read that I'm fully committing to for the month is my reread of Howling Dark, although I might actually choose to read it from the EU version this time around instead of this version, just because the quality of the paper in there is the type that I really like to read. So, but with that being said, yeah, I'm going to work on this for a lot of the month, because from this point forward, I am actually helping with a certain project related to the series for Christopher as well. And this is the first one that I'm going to be doing it on, and I don't know how much extra time it's going to take me to get through it as such, and I do want to get this finished before September for a couple of different reasons, neither of which I really need to get into here, but this is going to be my primary read throughout the month of August, and I'm very excited for the reread, because I loved this book the first time around. I think in fact, it might have been, what was it, my second favorite book of 2022. It was somewhere in the top 3, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was somewhere in the top 3 of 2022. Someone who's watched the top 10 videos and remembers or wants to go back and check that out could correct me. But yeah, it was one of my favorite books of last year, without a doubt. So I'm excited to get through it again this year, and especially to see what more I catch. Kind of like some of the things that I enjoy so much about this a little bit more than I did the first time, because of the references and the foreshadowing. I'm really excited to see what this book does with that as well. Next up, in terms of this month's reads, is all going to be like, if I have time stuff, or, if there's a moment that I want to read and I'm not really up to working on Howling Dark at that moment, I have a couple other easy reads to do. The first one being, obviously, Mark of Athena by Rick Riordan, the third book in Heroes of Olympus. It's been a few months since I read the first two, or reread the first 2 books in the series, and I really enjoyed that. This, in my memory, is one of my favorites, so if I can get through this month, is kind of like the palate cleanser read that I do when I'm not working on Howling Dark. That'll be what I do, and as such, I'm going to include the House of Hades on here as well, which is, again, I'm pretty sure these 2 are like my number 1 and 2 of the series, if I'm remembering correctly, but it's been years, so I don't know for sure. But these 2 are going to be like my palate cleanser reads that I kind of like get to if I have time, and if you know, depending on what my reading looks like with Howling Dark, and that's basically it. If I do happen to finish Howling Dark in time and have, you know, time to move on to another project within Sun Eater, it will be the Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 1 in here. And, you know, of course, if I happen to also plow through that, I have Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 2 on here as well. But that's basically what is planned for the month. Howling Dark is the main thing. A couple Rick Riordan books on the side for easy reading when I'm not in the mood for the Sun Eater. And then additional Sun Eater in case I finish Howling Dark a bit early. So that is what's going on. Nothing too crazy. In fact, everything on this list is rereads for August, which is a little surprising. And I think I was initially like maybe considering trying to get Valor in there, the second book in Faithful of the Fallen, into this month instead. But I do want to try to close off Heroes of Olympus first, if possible. And because of what I'm doing with Sun Eater, I want something that's a little bit easier to read and maybe something that I already know that I love and have been loving, like Heroes of Olympus. Whereas Valor, who knows? I didn't love Malice, and I don't want to be lukewarm on Valor and have it affect my reading for the rest of the summer, basically. So that is what's going down. Maybe I'll start Valor anyway. Who knows? Yeah, with that being said, thank you guys for watching. This is the end of this video. I will be back again on Thursday with, what is it? Apparently 10 novels that are 1,000 pages or so that I still need to read or that I want to read. That video is going to be coming out on Thursday. I recorded that a few months ago, actually, and I had a great time with it. So I hope you'll be willing to check that out because it is a top 10. I'm assuming that maybe it'll do a little bit better than some of the other discussion type videos, but basically everything's been doing well on my channel as of recent. Either way, with that being said, thank you guys again for watching. I'll be back on Thursday for another episode of the Book Binge, and back next week with that review that I talked about, being Obsidian Murders by Nicole Brona. So if you'll stick around for those, I'd be especially grateful. Thank you for watching. I'll be back in the next one.